My name is Jim True. I am the project manager and support lead for Pod's framework. We have Scott Clark, who is the lead developer for Pods 3.0. We have Josh Pollock, who is our community lead and also a lead developer for Pods 3.0. And we have Justin Sternberg, who is the lead developer and engineer for CMB2. So today we're going to be talking about Pods 3.0 and CMB2 and how they're going to be integrating together. Scott, if you want to, go ahead and kick off with a little intro about how this is going to work.
Sure. So I'm Scott, the lead developer of the Pods project, and we've been around since about 2008. And it's been a pretty cool project going along. We started with a sort of a remediary version that added some features to WordPress called advanced content types, and those were their individual own tables with their own columns, with their own fields and definitions and content outside of WordPress, but they were inside of WordPress in terms of the UI. And along that process of development, we continuously added more features, added more things, and we found that at some point you sort of gather enough technical debt as a project, as any project really, and it makes sense to reevaluate things. So one of the things I did recently, it was probably October of 2014, I was getting ready for my presentation at WordCamp Toronto, and I started trying to figure out some stuff because my background in WordPress is I've been working with WordPress since 2008, and as of the last year, I've been working on this new metadata project, which is hopefully going to introduce a new metadata API for registering fields to post types and users and eventually other things as well. But as part of that work, I had to sit down and think, what am I doing here? How can I make this better? And at the same time, I realized, hey, Pods is actually, we have our own custom thing. I wonder if we can utilize anything that can make it easier for us in the future whenever this metadata API appears, or perhaps whenever another solution that's similar to it could be used right away. What can we do? So I started thinking maybe we shouldn't be too egotistical with our own code, and this is something almost every developer is. It's just part of their nature. As a developer, we want to build cool things. We want to know how things work. We want to know, that we can rely on things. And a lot of times it depends on who you work with and what software you use. But whenever it's yours, you can sort of own it, and you can feel like, okay, I know that it does this. I know it doesn't do this. But at some point, if you've met some really great developers along the way, and you know people who do solid code, you've used those libraries before, as such as this case, then it makes a lot of sense. So for us, we decided to we put this to a vote, sort of. We discussed it and everything in our online chat room that's free for everyone. We decided to merge in CMB2 as a library, a dependency, into Pods. And this makes sense in a number of ways, but a major way is we're going to reduce a lot of the clutter inside of Pods core. We're going to abstract even more, so that we'll be ready for a metadata API when it appears inside of WordPress. It may not appear this year, but it's definitely going to be in development, and we're going to really push hard to try to get something in there. And I think it's going to really help us because we now share library code with another project, which is its own project, and they have their own team, they have their own tests, they have their own everything. So there's a lot of things we could tap into there. This is sort of similar to how Drupal integrated some Symfony components, and it makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways. They reduced a lot of their code that was unique to theirs, a lot of their own bugs. Now in our case, it would be CMB2 bugs that we would get to work on, and features. We can enhance things, bring things over from Pods over to CMB2, and vice versa. So there's a lot of really nice things that come out of that. And so that's sort of the reason why we're here today, is to discuss this and to introduce Justin from the CMB2 team. He's the lead developer over there, and he works at Web Dev Studios, which is the primary backer of the CMB2 project. And I think it's just really going to be smart for us to work together instead of um, moving down the singular road of just our own code and our own stuff to mess with. I think we could really benefit from a lot of things that CMB2 brings. For example, the main priority being loop fields. It has loop fields in it. We just have to adapt it for pods and hook it up with our admin UI. So there's some really cool things that just happen right away.
Cool. All right, Justin. I think you're unmuted now. Yeah. All right. Justin, can you give us a little bit of background on how you, I know you actually did this in your article yesterday that you posted on your website, but just real briefly, can you give us a little bit of background on how CMB2 came about and how you kind of like revamped the whole project?
Yeah, definitely. So a couple years ago, when it was being that project was being maintained by a group of guys, Jared Atkinson started it, and then Bill Erickson did a lot of work on it. Andrew Norcross did a lot of work on it. I know Gary J did a little bit of work on it, and it was a really good project. Like, you could just throw it in there, add some meta boxes, and boom, you're done. Right? Very handy. But it started to become stale. The guys weren't maintaining it as much as they were before. And I don't think they were using it as much. I think they were on to some other kinds of projects, and it was something that I had started to use in a lot of projects. So I just talked to Jared, and was like, hey, I got a bunch of stuff I'd like to get in there. How can we make this happen? And he said, I'll just make you a committer. And that was like early 2013. And at that point, I just took it and owned it. I looked through a lot of the issues that were going on at the time on GitHub, and just started to add some patches and add some new features, and just continue to develop it till it got to a point where I thought it really needed an architectural change because it wasn't very scalable. It was using a big old switch statement, that kind of stuff, just to handle the field output. So then we took some time to make it a little more object-oriented and a little more flexible, while trying to kind of maintain a lot of, or all of, the backwards compatibility. We managed to do it, but it was a little bit ugly, And so about, I'd say, early last year, middle of last year, we started to see some bugs pop up where people would have one version installed, and someone else would have another version installed, and it would take priority of whichever one loaded first. So if your plugin was AAA whatever, your version would get loaded whether it was old and crappy or not. And so that became something that was obviously a problem that we wanted to solve. Especially since we were using it in a lot of our projects, we didn't want to have them install some sort of plugin that used it and then break everything that we'd written based on the new functionality. So that became a priority. The way we did that kind of required a restructuring again. So at that point, it just made sense to fork it and just start completely fresh. Keep the same paradigm, but do things in a way that made sense. So we kind of redid a lot of the filters and actions, and added a lot of filters and actions, and just made it a lot more flexible. Somewhere in that process, we made it so that it's not just a post-meta plugin. It has different levels of abstraction, so you can use the methods for a particular field type just all by itself. You don't have to have the whole CMB class loaded to do it. So there's a lot of things that went into it, but ultimately it just came down to we're using it on almost every project that we do. It's become a dependency for almost every project we do, and it's something that we use consistently. So it's developed and maintained consistently. Hopefully that.
No, that was a good answer. Thank you. So now I guess really at this point we're really going to be starting to ask the questions about how CMB2 and how pods are going to be working together. We've hit kind of the first bit of that little intro piece. So Scott, how will CMB2 integrate with Pods 3.0? What part is it replacing or augmenting?
So what we're going to be doing there is, of course, CMB2 handles the meta box, adding the meta boxes individually, the output, the form inputs, the validation, the saving process. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking that, pulling it into pods as a dependency, but also we're going to be having some of our custom inputs put into there. So we're going to override some inputs, override some validation, override the saving, because we have different places we save things. So that's where we're going to primarily integrate with. We've already got that part working. There's just a few things left to do on the saving process, and the loop fields. We want to make sure that we can do some of the stuff we have to do inside of our field types. We're going to be doing that for the loop fields as well. So there's still a bit of work to do, but it's actually inside of Pods 3.0 right now, and there's still some leftovers that we're able to clear out now. I'm really happy to delete some methods, and be able to depend on CMB2 for it, because again, CMB2 has unit tests, it has tests, and it has all that stuff. We have no tests for some of this stuff that we've had in Pods for a while, so we get a lot of things out of it. I mean, that's a big benefit to just say I'm replacing code that wasn't testable with code that is tested and is independently supported. So that's a win. And I mean, again, you don't see other plugins doing this because they have a vested interest in their own way of doing things, their own code. But I think if more people did something like what we're doing here with Pods, I think we could see a lot more happen, because instead of working to continuously fix your own bugs and your own problems and your own features and add new things to things, when things are separated out like this in a CMB2 versus Pods separation there, like you have CMB2 as a project, you have Pods as a project, we fix our bugs, they fix their bugs, but more importantly, they add features, and we get to pull those features into Pods. So we don't have to work on those features, they're working on those features. They don't have to work on features for Pods. We're working on features for Pods. So it's just mutually beneficial, and it's really exciting. I'm happy to be the first plugin developer to step up and do it, at least for this type of a plugin. I mean, you'll see CMB2 used a lot in other types of plugins, maybe not a whole lot on WordPress.org, but you'll see it used often, just not for a custom field plugin like Pods. And you would almost think, why is Pods doing CMB2 when Pods is supposed to be doing what CMB2 does? But Pods does a whole lot more than what CMB2 does. Mm-hmm. It's not just the custom fields and display, and that's just a fraction of the code base. So to be able to take that out of the block of code that we have to worry about is significant for us, because now we can work on some really cool features, because that part has always been somewhat stable. It wasn't going to get a whole lot better. It was just there, it was done, we're adding features all around it. But now with CMB2, we get all the features that they built into all that stuff, and all the tests.
I think too, like you and I, our projects kind of have different focuses, right? Because you're focusing on like the user and people who can edit these fields and kind of maintain these projects from the WordPress dashboard, whereas that's never been a focus for CMB2. It's always been about the code and having all this configuration stuff be programmable, So I think they're very complementary in their goals, and that I never wanted to add a UI. It's not something that I wanted to spend energy on, and develop and support and all that good stuff, and that's where you guys kind of shine, right?
Yeah.
The support team really fills in and all that good stuff. So I think they're very complementary as far as like goals go as well.
Yeah, and we get to reuse CMB2 parts that are inside of it for like the metabox handling. We don't just use it for post types. We use it for all the other content types that we have in Pods too. So, and of course CMB2 supports a lot of those things, but for instance, it doesn't support advanced content types because that's unique to Pods. But we can use it now for advanced content types and take out all that other code. So before now, we've had a whole lot of extra code lying around for advanced content types. Now we can sort of abstract all that into CMB2 and just be sailing off of that really cool integration.
Yeah, and speaking of custom content types, or custom input output, That was like one of the goals that we had early on, was to make it a little more flexible to where it would do user meta, or in a lot of cases we use it for options data as well. So using the options table. So the whole like where you get the data and where you put the data is really flexible, which is great for, like you said, custom content types and these kinds of things that are not a post type and they're not whatever, but they're pretty easily overriding.
Hey guys, Josh actually has a question he wants to ask. Are you on off mute, Josh? Let me make sure you are. There you go. Oh, there you go, Josh.
I think I control my own mute.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
We can hear you fine.
So I have a question, and I think a lot of people had this, and it was in our doc. As far as validation goes of inputs, some people are using the UI to control pods exclusively, which is now going to be replaced by CMB2. But a lot of us are either using our internal API, using the pods API class or whatever's wrapping it, or using the pods JSON API add-on, which is also wrapping the pods API class. So the question that a lot of us have architecturally, because I'm one of these people who does a lot of pod save or pods JSON API saving, will moving our validation from the UI into CMB2 mean that when we save via the API, it also goes through CMB2's validation, or is that going to have its own separate validation? I guess that's where confusion is.
We're looking at probably overriding their validation because we have a lot of validation stuff, but we're also looking at integrating our validation into their stuff. So it's at first it'll be more of us than them, but long term we hope that we'll be merging more stuff from our side to their side. So that's another benefit, because we'll be able to move some things over that we won't have to worry about, but all the CMB2 users get to use.
Okay, and then my side question into that is, so will it be the same validation whether I'm saving via UI or saving via API?
Yes. The only difference would be any JavaScript validation that's kicking in. That will still be UI specific, whereas the API will only be doing. In 3.0, we can have it use WP errors or whatever else we want. So I think it's safe to say that we can do whatever we think needs to happen with the API side, because most people will be using the UI.
Did that answer your question, Josh?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I think we may have actually hit on some of these in our little bit of discussion at the beginning here about what does this say about pods and what will this mean for CMB2. But one good thing we can actually bring up here is the features. You've actually talked about the features you're bringing over from CMB2 into pods, but can you kind of like list those out like feature items, Scott?
Sure. So in pods we've had groups for a while, and it's only UI based. So in the admin area, you can add a group to a pod through code and have it display in the form area. And it works for post types, it works for the other content types, it just doesn't work for advanced content types until pods 2.5. But the actual generation of those groups will now, inside of pods 3.0, it's a lot more optimized, but the end result is us hitting their API for CMB2 to register them. And then CMB2 will handle outputting of the meta boxes and all that stuff. We'll be overriding inputs, but they'll be handling all the registration of the meta boxes and everything that you get along with that, like show it if this is that or whatever. So we get some cool features out of that, and that's primarily what we're going to be pulling in from CMB2. We'll be looking at other things as well, but currently that's the main focus, is to reduce our code weight in that particular area and generalize it and abstract it enough so that whenever a metadata API comes along, we can wrap it with a CMB2 compatibility layer or something. So we'll probably be still using CMB2 when the metadata API comes out, because there'll be lots of CMB2 features that would be nice to have, and CMB2 will be then somewhat compatible with the metadata API as well. So
yeah, I mean that's our goal, is whenever that metadata API makes it into core, that would be the engine that drives CMB2.
Yeah.
I think a lot, like one of the questions is what'll happen to pods, what'll happen to CMB2 when this API hits core. Well, they're not going away.
Yeah.
We're always going to have layers of abstraction on top of that add very helpful features and things to users. So it
Yeah.
definitely never go away. I can't see core including everything that's in CMB2, and certainly not everything that's in pod.
Yeah. See, the new metadata API will be extremely lightweight, and it will not have a significant amount of features, especially out the gate. But it will be somewhat feature comparatively to the customizer interface. Will have lots of those types of features inside the API, but I think that the significant amount of proof from the time that custom post types were implemented into WordPress, it didn't just take away these custom post type or content type plugins like pods. It just made them easier. So now pods could do more stuff with less code, and we could focus on other things. And yeah, so it may have made it possible for more developers to just use their own code, which is great. They may not have actually needed to use pods. They may not have needed those features. But for the people that still need those types of features, which is significant, we're still here. And for the metadata API to come along and get into core, it's the same sort of thing for CMB2. There'll still be field types that CMB2 can implement. There'll still be lots of cool things that you can utilize as wrappers, make things easier. There'll still be things that pods can do. Well, lots of things. I would say the metadata API replaces maybe 5 or 10% of what pods does. So really, it's not going to affect pods as much as CMB2, but CMB2 will still have a significant usage from within pods because it's going to be pretty useful. Yeah.
Cool. What features will pods actually bring to CMB2?
We're hoping to get some of our validation stuff into our custom field type options, some of the new input stuff. We have some field types in pods that aren't comparative to the CMB2 stuff. And we'd like to improve the loop field interface, so we're going to be sort of a catalyst to help with that. And we'd like to also help improve the optimization of registering new meta boxes and fields and such, so that those things aren't as memory consuming. And so there's a lot of stuff we'll be bringing over from what we've done, and there's a lot of things that we'll hopefully be able to bring right into the metadata API as example experience.
Excellent. This next question is for Justin. What's the primary difference between CMB and CMB2? You may have actually handled this in your blog article. It's about the older versions hung onto themselves and overrode in memory.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Or I would say that's probably the biggest thing that prompted the change, and probably the most important thing. But really, it just, like I said, it provided us the opportunity to start fresh and do it over. Obviously, I'd been working on it for quite a while, so there was a lot in there that we wanted to keep that we brought over. But overall, the structure was improved, and a lot of things were improved. And as far as how different is it now from CMB1, it's very different. I mean, and by very different, I mean a lot more powerful, a lot more filters, a lot more actions, a lot more parameters that you can add to your fields to do certain things, callbacks, etc. So basically, I would say CMB1 is just an older and deprecated version of CMB2. So.
Okay. One of the questions that came up on this is there's a lot of different forks of CMB out there, and what's being done to bring the community back together so that everyone won't have to work against each other?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of different forks of CMB is probably a little heavy-handed. I don't think there are that many that are used quite a bit. The one notable exception would be HumanMate's fork that happened before I jumped on board. And that's also a very capable MetaBox plugin. As far as I understand it, there are areas that I would say are a little bit better than CMB2 is some of their UI stuff. I think they have columns you can add. Their loop fields that you guys call them, I think, are a little bit cleaner. As in, I think you can have some repeatable WP editor instances, which is not something CMB2 handles yet. And when it does, it'll probably use whatever their implementation has. And we've been in talks with them as well to do something very similar, like we're talking here, is just join forces, figuring out how we can reconcile the two. They are very different at this point, so it's not something we could just like merge. It would have to be a meeting of the minds, and so far we haven't had that opportunity to do it, but we would all love to do it. We're just all really busy.
I'm trying to see on the next question here. How does CMB2 do its units tests?
That's a good question. So we have tests for several different classes, obviously. The one that I consider kind of the most important and that does the most work would be the test that test the types class. So every field type, it has its own method to handle that type, whether it's a select field or an input or whatever. And so we have a unit test for every field type. And then in a lot of cases we have field types for updating that field type with the API, making sure that the update does what it does. And the way that we kind of do our tests for the output of these types is we set up the HTML structure we expect back, and then we test that. We do an output buffer, and we test that what we get back actually matches the HTML of what we expected. So when we add some API or something that adds a feature or whatever, and it breaks it, that's obviously what we want, right? We want it to go, hey, this doesn't match anymore, and then we can either update our test to include the new feature, or fix the thing we just broke. So basically, to put it in its most simplistic form, is kind of a string comparison to make sure that what you expect is what you get back, right?
Excellent. How does CMB2 handle when multiple plugins are using it at once with their own embedded versions?
Yeah.
What's the fallback? Yeah.
So basically, the simple answer is that with every version, the main initiation class is going to have a different class name, so it doesn't conflict with the other version. So you'll have like CMB init or Bootstrap 2.00 and then 2.01, and then it's just going to keep incrementing. And while that increments, the actual initiation hook on the init hook decrements. So when CMB 2.0.2 comes out, it'll go from 9998 to 9997. And so it's going to fire, and then CMB, having the class exist check, will basically, yep, it already exists, so I don't need to load my version. And that's kind of the way that we ensure that the most recent version gets loaded. Now, people could break that, obviously, doing inadvisable things, but overall, it's a pretty solid method, I think. And we have, I think, 998 versions to go before we run out of hooks. So.
Wow. Okay. Who is behind CMB2? I know it's Web Dev Studios, but which is your core team working on it?
Everybody kind of contributes here and there depending on what they're working on. If it's a particular feature that they needed for a client project or whatever, we'll try and make sure that gets back in there. But for the most part, it's me. I kind of maintain the project. I use it the most. I understand the internals of it better than anybody, so it's primarily me. But I know Patrick Garman's done a lot, Greg Rickaby's done a lot, Corey's done a few things. Like pretty much everyone in our team has had a hand in it at one point or another. And if nothing else, they provide a ton of feedback as far as like, hey, what's up with this? And I go, oh, that's probably broken. That's probably something that needs help. So. The fact that we're all using it on a pretty daily basis means that they're all, helping out a lot.
Cool. This next question is for Scott. What's the timeline for integration for pods and CMB2?
So the timeline is it's ongoing. Like I said, we already have the prototype already set up in the Pods 3.0 code base. There's things to fix, there's things to test and finish, but for the most part, I think we're looking at having that done after we finish the 2.5 version merge from our code base. We have probably another few weeks of that left, unless I can find a significant amount of time outside of work. There's always stuff to do. But beyond that, I'm hoping we can get something out the door for at least finishing CMB2 stuff by the end of February or start of March. And from there, we still have a little bit left to do inside of Pod's core itself. I actually have a list here, which is relevant to this question as well. So as part of the CMB2 integration, we're working on loop fields, and there's still some JavaScript stuff we need to rewrite on our side for our field types inputs. And there is still some stuff we need to do for the admin display of those field type editors. And that actually, markup and styles are already done, so we just have to put it in and get the JavaScript hooked up. And just make sure the unit tests are running again. We already have a lot of unit tests running for Pods 2.x. We're going to keep a cloned version of those tests to test backwards compatibility. However, we'll be adding the other original tests will be converted over to the Pods 3.0 test, and we'll get those running. So that's the plan currently. I'd love it to be out sooner than later, but everything takes time, and everything seems to crash in on you whenever you're trying to do things. So we've got a lot of stuff we got going on with Pods itself. So some cool announcements this month, hopefully. But outside of that, 3.0 is still going to be our primary focus.
Is there any plans to split up the types and CMB types.php into their own objects?
Another great question. That's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. It's just a matter of priorities. And I think for me the next kind of big priority that I have is kind of the JavaScript and the way the loop fields work and making it a little bit cleaner and a little bit better, including the whole being able to make WYSIWYGs, repeatable. That's kind of my next big focus. And then I would say that might be my next priority, depending on what comes in via issues and all that kind of stuff. But it's something I wanted to do for a long time. I think it'll make it a little bit cleaner. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. It's a little more object-oriented. But right now, the way it's working works pretty well. And so I'm not, it's certainly not a high priority like we need to make this happen, simply because the solution we have in place works very well. It's very tested, And I also don't, I don't want to add any more field types to core for a while, because I want to make sure that the field types we have are supported and do a good job, and that they work well in all situations, including repeatable groups and all that kind of stuff. So to me, making sure the ones we have are solid and work on all of those environments is a lot more important to me than adding more field types and making that something that's a priority.
Okay, thank you. What about custom field types? What happens to them for Pods 3.0, and what about existing custom field types people have built? That might be a question.
So our field types inside of Pods are class-based. Each of them are their own class type, and they inherit from the main Pods field class. Assuming that they have built a field type that is currently working for Pods 2.0 or 2.x, the plan is to keep it backwards compatible for CMB2 integration, but we'll have to see how that lands because that's not done yet. So the plan is to keep it compatible to make sure that those things still work, but if they don't, you're free to submit them and we'll help you change them over. And we'd love to help you redistribute those. So if you have custom field type ideas, we'd love to see them shared. We'd love to see if they're maybe even core worthy. Maybe we can include them or help you abstract them out into their own plugins so other people can download it from WordPress.org. Lots of cool things. And another separate thing about the field types from CMB2, there's a lot of stuff inside of Pods that will be overriding, but I'm hoping that we can help CMB2 with their efforts there too. So I think there's going to be lots of cross-team collaboration on their field types evolving over the next year or two.
Josh has a question for you, for both of you, I believe. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, if people are looking or curious, if people are itching to get Pods 3.0 done and want to help out with a specific portion of either CMB2 or Pods integration, if they want to jump in on UI or they want to jump in on JavaScript validation, these sorts of things that are still in the air, or unit testing, Are there good places for them to do that, either to help advance CMB2 or help advance our integration? Are there specific issues open, or I guess that's more of a question for Scott. Like, what would be the best way if somebody's out there saying, "Oh, I can help with API integrate with our JavaScript for loop fields that needs done"?
Yeah, we have a GitHub, of course. So does CMB2. We have Jim here, who is the current moderator of the channel chat, and he is our project manager, so he helps us organize a lot of things. He does support as well. Josh is our support lead, community manager, and he does quite a bit of work within the community as well. So there's a lot of channels to help get you in. All you have to do is ask, and we'll get you right in, incorporated into wherever you want. We're always very happy to have people help with patches, but not just it's not just one-sided. We communicate, we help you mold it. If there's anything that needs to be changed, we'll help you change it. So there's lots of opportunity for growth as a developer who wants to contribute, but also to be able to make a difference. There's only a few of us on the team, maybe about 5 to 7 of us over time the last year, primary contributors on the Pods project. We could definitely use more, and we're not all full time on it. So we could use any extra effort.
The general rule of thumb for that kind of thing too is like try and keep your contributions as focused as possible, and that way, like I'm sure you feel the same way, Scott. But when you get a pull request that says, "Hey, I added this feature, but I also thought this should be this way and this should be this way," so that's in there too. It's like, well, that just doesn't work. It pretty much just puts that pull request on the shelf until we have some imaginary free time to try out all 3 aspects that they added, right? But if it's very focused and said, "Here's what it does, here's what I expected before, it didn't happen, so I did this, and then now it does this, and here's why," it is very clearly laid out and very focused pull request. That's definitely going to help you and I both as project maintenance.
Yeah, that's true with WordPress core as well. You can't get a big ticket in for the life of you. You have to make it as small as possible, as reduced in scope as possible, and then inch your way forward from there. So that's definitely applicable to multiple projects.
If people want to submit new kinds of field types, I know this has probably come up a couple times in issue requests for pods, things like the address fields, the geocode fields, that sort of thing. Was that something that's actually going to be geared towards CMB2 or geared towards pods?
Well, you could build field types for pods. Pods will only show the field types we have built in, but if there's a field type inside of CMB2 that you could piggyback off of, those field types could be added to pods in a similar way. So, I would love to see any field type that's added to pods be able to be added to CMB2, at least as an extension. So things are going to change in Pods 2.0 and the way we handle those types of things. So I'm hoping we can have better code organization in terms of what goes in CMB2, what goes into pods. But we're still figuring those sort of things out.
We know you've got a very large document here about the CMB2 wrapper inside pods and how our fields kind of mirror up to the CMB2 fields. Were there any missing, or were there any that needed to be built up or otherwise?
No, everything that we have in pods right now is going to be represented in Pods 2.0 with an addition of some new field types that are block-oriented. So you can add HTML fields that just pure HTML that get inserted into the forms. You'll be able to have heading fields, so you can add headings in between form fields and such, and eventually some other things.
You mean like field groupings, that sort of thing?
Sort of. It's faux grouping somewhat. We'll eventually be able to let you add tabs and such, but right now it's pretty just basic. But there are a couple of new field types in Pods 3.0, but they're not tied to CMB2 at all. They're just unique to Pods.
Okay, cool. You actually asked me to ask you about exporting. You want to go ahead and...
So I'm happy to announce, as well as our official release announcement of CMB2 integration with pods, I'm happy to announce that we're also going to be focused, after we finish Pods 2.0, focused on exporting your configuration from pods into CMB2 markup. So if you are building stuff for pods, you'll be able to install this plugin and you'll be able to export it into CMB2 code that's compatible with just any CMB2 installation. And that's a great benefit for those who want to prototype and build things within pods and then move it out into custom code. We also will have an export to code plugin that's already in beta right now, which converts to pods code-based registration, so you can register pods and fields via code, but build them in the UI and then export it. But this is different because the CMB2 export will only be CMB2 specific. It won't have any of the pods extra stuff in it. So there'll be some cool things out of that. But that's something I'm happy to do because I think that it's another added benefit of the CMB2 integration into pods. Now you can prototype things with the UI for CMB2 and then just export right out to code.
That's very cool.
Well, I don't actually see any questions on our chat channel, so I'd kind of like to open up again verbally. Any questions that anybody may have, go ahead and drop them in the chat channel on Slack chat, or any of the other questions that Josh may have, go ahead and speak up.
Real quick, someone earlier mentioned the question about separating out the field types to classes. And the reason for his question was he was thinking of validation and how if we add more validation code, how that class will become bloated quickly. So I answered him in chat, but I might as well do it here, right?
Okay.
But basically, the idea is right now the types class only handles the display, the HTML. That's all it does. It doesn't think about validation. It doesn't think about sanitization. It doesn't even think about field parameters or any of that. So the way we think of it is like we have different classes that handle those different duties. So as far as sanitization goes, it's a completely separate class that somewhat mirrors the types class in that it has a method for each type that needs a special handling for its sanitization. And if there's no method that matches that type, it kind of falls back to the default, if that makes sense. So I could see validation being handled the same way, though. I'd really like to get an idea of the difference between validation and sanitization as far as the vision in pods goes. But that's kind of the paradigm, I guess, that CMB2 holds, is that each job kind of has its own class and that does that aspect of it.
Cool. Scott, do you have anything to add on that one? Or were you listening?
No, I don't have anything to add on that one. I was listening. Nope, nothing to add there.
Okay. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't look like we actually have any other questions sitting out there. Josh, did you have anything additional you'd like to add?
No, I do not.
Okay. To wrap it up then, Scott or Justin, anything else you guys would like to add in about the discussion? I know we've pretty much talked about implementation, we've talked about time frames, etc. Anything else you guys would like to say in closing? Josh or Scott or Justin?
Yeah, I'll just add, I'm definitely excited about this integration. I think it's going to be really awesome to have the whole pod side of the equation to kind of help with pre-release testing and such, and by the pod side, I mean your team, being able to test new features and stuff, make sure it doesn't break your integration, which overall is going to help all of the users, right? Because if it breaks something for you, it probably means it's going to break something for other people as well. And obviously our goal is to be as backwards compatible, keep that in mind as much as possible. So I'm definitely excited about that. And as far as moving forward in progress, I know Scott added some different issues in the CMB2 side of things. I think we even got some pull requests and merged some of those in already. So as you guys come across things like that, certainly let's get some issues going and start those discussions.
Excellent.
Yeah, and on my side, I think that this whole thing is really cool because it's. I'm I'm lead developer of Pods, but at my day job, which is my full-time job, which is basically my life, I work at 10up, and Justin works at Web Dev Studios. So I think it's a nice example of being able to collaborate across different companies and different interests and everything coming together, and not just being about working only on or work with a project that's from 10up or some other company that's not as a direct competitor of 10up. So I think it's cool that we can collaborate within the community together, and disregard any of the politics that could be perceived or involved. So I think that's really cool.
Well, that's the kind of the open source way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, sets or continues the precedence, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. I think that's pretty much it then. We don't have any other questions popping in. Actually, I see someone typing right now, so let's see if they make it in. Nope, I think we're good. So guys, I really appreciate you pulling all this together last minute and dealing with our technical difficulties at the beginning of the call. And we will be putting this out on YouTube and try to transcribe some of the questions so that we actually have like a cohesive article, but I think most people are going to get more out of actually watching the YouTube.
Thank you, Jim.
Cool.
Thank you, Justin.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Laters.
Later.